So 286. Today we're talking about some standouts in game one between Toronto and Ottawa from last night. And unsurprisingly, very physical. I was very much expecting that. I think coming into game one, we knew it was going to be a battle, and we knew these teams hate each other, so it was going to be physical throughout this game. And it was. It was basically every line. Every line was physical. Every line was getting engaged with somebody, whether it be during the play or after the whistles or something along those lines. So a lot of guys really engaged in the physical side of play this game, and I thought that was really interesting to see. Ottawa taking, I believe, 7 or 8 minor penalties, and one of which was misconduct in there as well. And I believe you add to that all the stuff that happened at the end of the game. Just not great from Ottawa's side. And I know Travis Green talked about after the game, they're kind of blaming the refs for the penalties and some of those calls, but some of which were actually good calls. And I felt like some of the refs were making those good calls, except for the Stützle one. The call on Stützle wasn't that great and wasn't good at all. But outside of that, I think a lot of those penalties were well deserved. And Ottawa didn't play well. Like they were just it kept feel like they took penalty after penalty after penalty. It was just and they kind of took themselves out of the game by taking so many penalties because I believe Toronto, they cashed in around 50% on their power play in this game. So when you allow Toronto to take advantage of their power play, they're going to score. So I think in talking about Ottawa, they're going to be a different team game two. I just don't know what to expect out of them game two. You would imagine they're still going to come out physical and they're still going to come out hard, but they have to limit the penalties. They have to limit that and really tone that down to settle into the series. Otherwise, it could be a really swayed series in favor of Toronto. And I think this definitely feels like a different year for Toronto. I know we've said this for a long, long time with Toronto and the Leafs and how they can't get out of the first round, but I genuinely feel like this year under new coach and Craig Berube, they have little bit of a different style. They have more X factors like Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews are more well-rounded than they have ever been in their careers. And then you look at Matthew Nyes, who could be an X factor. John Tavares is still up there, and there's some depth guys who can be involved offensively too. And I think Anthony Stolarz is also a really good goalie come playoff time too. And obviously him being 6'6", and that also helps. I think it's going to be an interesting situation to see how it plays out with Toronto, if they're able to move on or not. I would imagine they do. I genuinely believe this is a team that could go farther than years past, but I mean, it's the Leafs. Anything can happen, and usually they're out in round one, so I wouldn't be surprised if they're out in round one. But yesterday was a promising sign. They took advantage of a team that was clearly inexperienced in the playoffs, and a lot of that was clear. Like we know, and we were able to easily see how well Toronto was able to play against a team that is not used to being in the playoffs and has never been in the playoffs with a bunch of the players that they have in their team. And I thought some of the guys stood out. Like Stützle was okay for most of the game. I thought Brady Tkachuk was Brady Tkachuk, and we saw the physical side of his game. That was no surprise. One of the guys I was really impressed with throughout this game was Drake Batherson. I almost said Drake Sanderson. That was not it. Drake Batherson from Indiana. I think he was really effective and one of the best players in this game for Ottawa. Just a guy who he was physical, but he was tempered in how he used his physicality. So that was good for his side. And then just the offensive play, the two-way ability, the ability to play a defensive game, the ability to play a transition game, the ability to play with speed and pace and in the rush and in the ozone. I think that was something that Ottawa really needed in this game, and they brought it up the wings with him. He was one of their main X factors in this game. And I thought Linus Ullmark was okay in that. Honestly, I would have liked to see better out of him too and just a couple saves and a couple moments. But I think overall, this is just a team that's inexperienced. Ottawa, like they're gonna make the playoffs. They're gonna have to go through these learning curves in the playoffs to really understand what the playoffs is. You can't really know until you actually play a game what the playoffs are like. So I think that's just what Ottawa is gonna deal with for the time being. I think they're gonna come back with a stronger push in game two than we saw yesterday. Yesterday was just they took so many penalties, it just sucked the life out of themselves. And which is counterproductive to the way they usually play and counterproductive to the way they want to play. They want to play physical, they want to play on edge, but they don't want to go over the edge. And they have a lot of players who can easily go over the edge. Talk about Ridley Gregg and Brady Tkachuk and some of those other guys who can easily go over the edge and get hot-tempered pretty quick. And that's what happened yesterday. And like I said before, Toronto was able to take advantage of that. I think Ottawa, they you can't just identify yourselves as a goon team because if you're just gonna identify as that, you're not going to win. And Toronto has the skill. They have some heavyweights on their team too, but they were tempered, and that was the main difference yesterday. And what I noticed was they were a little bit more tempered, and they're able to. There were a couple occasions where Ottawa was able to add fuel to the fire. Like I remember Adam Gaudette took a penalty and then shoved Austin Matthews and then basically fueled Austin Matthews for the rest of the power play. Like, not necessarily a smart thing to do because when you're fueling Austin Matthews and making Austin Matthews mad, he's probably going to score. So I just think Ottawa, I've said this multiple times, but they just need to be more tempered. And I, I could say disciplined, but I don't think that's the right word. I think temper is the right word because there were just times where they were hot temper, they would explode quickly, and they would just blow it for themselves, which was surprising. 'Cause I was surprised coming into this game because I would have thought Ottawa would play the exact opposite. And maybe Toronto would push them more to that edge a little bit, just because of how Craig Berube wants his team to play and how they've played for a majority of the regular season. They like to play defense, but they like to play heavy in their forecheck. They like to play heavy man to man. I was expecting the opposite. I was honestly expecting Toronto to take more of the penalties, but surprising to me that Ottawa did so, but yeah, like I said, they're gonna come out with a stronger push in game two.